The space station hung in the darkness like a bright jewel. Ships came and went from its many ports. Beings from 100 different worlds walked its metal halls. Some came to trade, some came to buy, and some came for the dragons. Una had not come for dragons. She was a cargo pilot, nothing more. Her small ship carried medicine to outer colonies and brought back rare metals. It was simple work, honest work. She liked it that way. But her ship needed repairs, and repairs cost money. So she had stopped at Station 12 to find extra work. That was how she found herself standing at the back of the great auction hall, watching creatures she had only heard about in stories. The hall was enormous. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds of steam gathered near the lights. Hundreds of beings sat in curved rows of seats, all facing a raised platform at the center. The seats were filled with the wealthy and powerful. Una could see nobles from the Vec Empire in their golden robes. She saw merchant princes from the hollow worlds counting coins. She saw warriors from the Outer Rim, their scales gleaming under the lights. They had all come for the same thing: dragons. On the platform, handlers in thick armor brought out cage after cage. Inside each cage was a dragon hatchling. They were beautiful creatures, each one the size of a large dog. Their scales shimmered in colors that Una had never seen before. Deep purples that shifted to blue, reds that burned like fire, greens that seemed to hold the light of distant forests. The auctioneer was a tall being with 4 arms and a voice that filled the hall without effort. He called out numbers, and the nobles raised their paddles. The prices climbed higher and higher. A purple hatchling sold for more money than Una would earn in 10 lifetimes. A red one sold for even more. Una watched it all with quiet wonder. She had heard the stories. Of course, everyone had. Dragon bonds were the most powerful connections in the galaxy. When a dragon chose to bond with a master, they became partners for life. The dragon would fight for his master, die for his master. In return, the master would care for the dragon, love it, protect it. But bonds were rare. Dragons were proud creatures. They chose their masters carefully. Many who bought dragons at auction never formed a bond at all. The dragon would serve, but it would never truly belong to them. Still, the nobles bought them. A bonded dragon was worth more than armies. Even an embonded one was a symbol of wealth and power. Una was about to leave when she heard the laughter. It started near the front of the hall and spread backward like a wave. Una stood on her toes to see what was happening. On the platform, the handlers had brought out a new cage. But this one was different. It was larger, and it held not 1 hatchling, but 3. The auctioneer's voice had lost its smooth confidence. He seemed almost embarrassed as he spoke. "We have here 3 specimens from the latest clutch. I must inform you that these hatchlings are imperfect." The laughter grew louder. Una pushed forward to the crowd, trying to see better. "The first," the auctioneer continued, "was born without sight. Its eyes are clouded and do not function." Inside the cage, Una could now see a small creature huddled in the corner. Its scales were a soft silver color, like moonlight on water, but its eyes were white and empty, staring at nothing. The second was born without wings. The bones never formed correctly. Next to the first hatchling sat another, this one with scales of deep black. Where wings should have risen from its back, there were only small bumps of twisted bone. It kept trying to stretch muscles that had nothing to move. The third suffered damage during hatching. Its scales are scarred, and it cannot produce fire. The last hatchling was pressed against the bars of the cage, as far from the light as it could get. Its scales might have been blue once, but now they were covered in thick white scars. It trembled without stopping. "We offer these 3 as a lot," the auctioneer said. "The starting price is minimal. They would serve well as training subjects, or perhaps for those who study dragon biology." Una felt her stomach turn cold. She knew what training subjects meant. These hatchlings would be used to teach warriors how to fight dragons. They would be hurt and hurt again until they died. She looked around the hall. The nobles were still laughing. Some had already turned away. not interested in imperfect goods. A few were talking among themselves, discussing how much the bodies might be worth after the hatchlings died. No one raised a paddle to bid. The auctioneer waited. The silence stretched out. In the cage, the three hatchlings pressed together, seeking comfort in each other's warmth. The blind one lifted its head as if listening. The wingless one wrapped its tail around the others. The scarred one kept trembling. "If there are no bids," the auctioneer said, his voice now cold, "these specimens will be marked for disposal. We cannot waste resources on defective stock." Disposal. Una knew what that meant, too. Something moved in her chest. It was a feeling she did not have a name for. It was hot and sharp like anger, but also soft and deep like sadness. She thought of her grandmother back on Earth, who had lived her whole life with only one arm. She thought of her brother, who had been born deaf and learned to speak with his hands. She thought of all the people she loved the universe had marked as imperfect. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it. "Wait." The word came out louder than she meant it to. Suddenly, everyone was looking at her. Hundreds of alien eyes turned in her direction. She felt very small, very human, very much alone. The auctioneer tilted his head. "Does a human wish to bid?" More laughter filled the hall. A human? Bidding on dragons? Humans were not warriors. They were not nobles. They were cargo pilots and miners and engineers. They fixed things and moved things and built things. They did not own dragons. Una walked forward. The crowd parted around her, still laughing. She could hear their whispers. "Poor creature. Stupid creature. Does she not know her place?" She reached the front hall and looked up at the cage. The three hatchlings had stopped moving. They were watching her now, even the blind one, who seemed to sense her presence in some other way. "How much?" Una asked. The auctioneers were arms spread wide in a gesture of disbelief. "How much do you offer?" Una thought of the money in her accounts. It was everything she had saved for 5 years. It was meant for her retirement, for a small house on a quiet moon somewhere. "Everything," she said. "I offer everything I have." The laughter stopped. For a moment, the hall was perfectly silent. Then the auctioneer began to laugh again, harder than before. "Sold," he said, waving one of his hands. "Sold to the foolish human. Take your broken toys and leave." The handlers opened the cage and pushed the three hatchlings toward Una. They stumbled and fell and used to walking on the cold metal floor. The scarred one made a sound of fear. The blind one called out in a voice like bells. Una knelt down on the floor. She did not care that her pants would get dirty. She did not care that everyone was still watching. She looked at the three small creatures in front of her, broken and afraid and alone. "It's okay," she whispered. Her voice was gentle, like her mother's voice had been when she was small and scared. "I'm here now. I'll take care of you. I promise." The blind hatchling took one step forward. Then another. It pressed its head against Una's knee and made a sound like crying. Una gathered all three of them in her arms. They were warm and they were alive and they were hers. Behind her, the auction continued. New cages were brought out. New prices were called. But Una did not look back. She carried her three broken dragons out of the hall and into the metal corridors of the station. She did not know what she would do now. She had no money left. She had no plan. All she had was three imperfect hatchlings who needed her. But somehow that felt like enough. The corridors of Station 12 were long and cold. Una walked through them with three small dragons pressed against her chest. They weighed more than she had expected, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Behind her, she could still hear the distant sounds of laughter from the auction hall. She needed to get back to her ship. She needed to get somewhere safe. The station was busy at this hour. Beings of every kind filled the walkways. They moved around Una like water flowed around a stone. Most did not look at her, but some did. Some stopped walking. Some pointed. Some whispered each other in languages she did not understand. A human carrying dragon hatchlings. It must have looked very strange to them. Una kept her head down and walked faster. She was almost at the docking bay when a voice called out behind her, "Human, stop." Una's body wanted to run, but she made herself turn around, for beings stood in the corridor, blocking her path back. They were tall, taller than any human, with blue skin and eyes like golden coins. Their clothes were simple but clean. Una recognized them from the auction. They had been sitting in the front rows. "You purchased a defective hatchlings," one of them said. It was not a question. "Yes," Una said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. The being stepped closer. Its face was hard to read, but Una thought she saw something like concern in its golden eyes. "Do you understand what you've done? I bought 3 dragons. You bought 3 broken creatures that will never serve any purpose." The being shook its head slowly. "We have studied dragons for 1,000 years. Human, we know them better than we know ourselves. These hatchlings you carry are flawed at the deepest level. They will never bond." Una held the hatchlings tighter. "I don't need them to bond." "Then why did you buy them?" Una thought about the question. Why had she bought them? She could have walked away. She could have closed her eyes and let them be taken to their deaths. It would have been easier. It would have been smarter. But something inside her had refused. "Because no one else would," she said. The being stared at her for a long moment. Then it made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You humans are strange creatures. You feel things too deeply. You care about things that do not matter. They matter to me. They will die," the being said. Its voice was flat, like it was stating a simple fact. "Imperfect dragons do not survive long. Their bodies fail. Their minds break. Even if you feed them and keep them warm, they will not last more than a few months." Una felt her eyes grow hot, but she did not let herself cry. Not here. Not in front of these beings who saw her dragons as nothing but waste. "Then I will make those months good," she said. The being stared at her again. Something flickered in its golden eyes. Perhaps it was confusion. Perhaps it was something else. "Very well, human," it said finally. "Keep your broken toys. But do not say we did not warn you." The 4 beings turned and walked away. Una watched them go, her heart beating hard in her chest. Then she turned and continued toward the docking bay. Her ship was called the Morning Star. It was small and old and held together with patches and hope, but it was home. When Una stepped through the airlock and sealed the door behind her, she finally let herself breathe. She carried the hatchlings to the small living area at the back of the ship. There was a couch there, worn and soft from years of use. She set the hatchlings down on it gently. They huddled together, still scared. The blind one kept turning its head, listening to every sound. The wingless one tried to climb onto the back of the couch, then fell when its weak body could not hold it. The scarred one just sat and trembled. "It's okay," Una said softly. "You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you." She went to the ship's small kitchen and looked through her supplies. She did not have much food left, just some dried meat and a few vegetables. She would need to buy more before she could leave the station. But she had no money. She pushed that worry aside. Right now, the dragons needed to eat. She cut the dried meat into small pieces and put them on a plate. Then she brought the plate back to the couch and sat down on the floor. "Are you hungry?" she asked. The hatchlings did not move. They watched her with fear in their eyes. Even the blind one seemed to sense her presence and pulled back. Una understood. They had been treated badly their whole short lives. They had been called defective. They had been laughed at. They had been put in a cage and offered for sale like broken furniture. They had no reason to trust anyone. She picked up a piece of meat and held out on her palm. "Here," she said. "It's food. It won't hurt you." The blind hatchling lifted its head. Its nostrils moved as it smelled the air. Slowly, carefully, it stretched its neck toward Una's hand. Its mouth opened, showing rows of tiny sharp teeth. Then it took the meat and swallowed it. Una smiled. "Good. That's good." She offered more meat. This time, the wingless hatchling came forward too. It ate quickly, like it had not been fed in days. Maybe it had not been. The scarred hatchling stayed back. It watched the others eat with eyes full of longing, but it did not move. It was the most afraid of the three. Una did not push. She just kept her hand out, waiting. Finally, after many long minutes, the scarred hatchling crept forward. It sniffed the meat. Then it sniffed Una's hand. Then, so gently that Una almost did not feel it, it pressed its head against her fingers. Una stayed very still. She did not want to scare it away. The hatchling made a soft sound, almost like a purr. Then it took the meat and ate it. There you go, Una whispered. See? I'm not so bad. She stayed on the floor for hours, feeding the hatchlings until all the meat was gone. Then she found some old blankets in the storage bin and made a nest for them on the couch. They curled up together, their bodies overlapping, their scales catching the dim light of the ship. Una sat in her pilot's chair and watched them sleep. She thought about what the blue-skinned being had said. They will die. Even if you feed them and keep them warm, they will not last more than a few months. Maybe that was true. Maybe she was just delaying something that could not be stopped. But she had seen the way the hatchlings looked at her when she offered them food. She had felt the scarred one press its head against her hand. They were alive. They wanted to live. That had to mean something. Her communication screen lit up. A message was waiting for her. She opened it and saw that it was from the station's port authority. It listed her docking fees, her repair costs, and the amount she still owed. The number was large, very large. Una closed the message without reading the rest. She would worry about money tomorrow. Tonight, she just wanted to sit here in the quiet of her ship and watch 3 small dragons sleep. They had no one else in the entire galaxy. Just her. She thought about names. They would need names. Real names, not numbers or labels. The blind one had scales like silver moonlight, and it listened so carefully to everything around it. Tay, she said softly. I'll call you Tay. The wingless one had tried so hard to climb, even when its body would not let it. It refused to give up. Hannah, you're Hannah. The scarred one was still trembling, even in its sleep, but it had been brave enough to come to her in the end. And you're Woo. The hatchlings did not wake up. They just kept sleeping, their small bodies rising and falling with each breath. Una smiled in the dim light of her ship. The beings at the auction had said these dragons would never bond. They had said they were broken beyond repair. They had said they were worthless. But Una had never been very good at listening to what other people said. She leaned her head back against her chair and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would figure out how to pay her debts. Tomorrow, she would find a way to buy food. Tomorrow, she would face all the problems that were waiting for her. But tonight, she would just rest. Tonight, she would just be grateful. She had 3 dragons now. 3 broken, imperfect, beautiful dragons. And she would not let anyone take them away. 3 weeks passed on the Morning Star. They were hard weeks. Una had to take every job she could find just to buy food. She carried cargo that no one else wanted to touch. She flew routes that no one else would fly. She worked until her hands hurt and her eyes burned. But every night, she came back to her ship. Every night, she came back to Tay, Hannah, and Woo. The hatchlings were changing. She could see it in small ways at first. They stopped hiding when she walked into the room. They stopped flinching when she reached out to touch them. They started making sound when they heard her footsteps, sounds that were almost like greetings. Tay, the blind one, had learned to move around the ship without bumping into things. He used sound to guide himself, making soft clicking noises with his tongue and listening to the echoes. He knew where every wall was, every piece of furniture, every door. He knew the sound of Una's heartbeat and could find her anywhere on the ship just by listening. Hannah, the wingless one, had stopped trying to fly. Instead, she had learned to climb. Her claws were sharp, and her legs were strong. She would scale the walls of the ship like a cat, hanging from pipes and beams, watching everything from above. What she could not do in the air, she did in other ways. Woo! The scarred one was the slowest to change. He still trembled sometimes. He still flinched at loud sounds. But he had stopped hiding in the corner. Now he followed Yuna everywhere she went, his claws clicking on the metal floor, his eyes never leaving her. They were growing too. Each day, they were a little bigger. Their scales became brighter. Their eyes became clearer. The dried meat was not enough anymore, so Yuna started buying fresh meat when she could afford it. She watched them tear into it with their sharp teeth, and she felt something warm in her chest. They were alive. They were getting stronger. One night, after a long day of work, Yuna came home to find all 3 hatchlings waiting at the airlock. They were sitting in a row, their tails wrapped around their feet, their heads turned toward the door. When she stepped through, they made sound of joy and rushed toward her. Tay pressed his head against her leg. Hannah climbed up to her shoulder and wrapped her tail around Yuna's neck. Wu sat at her feet and looked up at her with eyes that seemed to say, "You came back." "I always come back," Yuna said, scratching Tay behind his ear. "Don't you know that by now?" She made dinner for all of them. She had bought some real meat today, a reward for finishing a difficult job. The hatchlings ate well, and when they were done, they curled up around her on the couch. Yuna sat very still. She could feel their warmth against her skin. She could hear their breathing, slow and steady. For the first time in a very long time, she did not feel alone. She started singing softly. It was an old song, one her grandmother had taught her. The words were in Korean, the language of her ancestors. She had not sung it in years, not since she left Earth. The hatchlings listened. Their bodies relaxed. Hannah closed her eyes. Tay made a soft purring sound in his throat. Even Wu stopped trembling. Yuna did not know how long she sang. She only stopped when she realized that the hatchlings had fallen asleep. She looked down at them, these 3 creatures that the galaxy had thrown away. They trusted her completely. They loved her completely. She could feel it in the way they pressed against her, the way they breathed with her, the way they seemed to know what she was feeling before she felt it herself. Something strange was happening. Yuna had heard about dragon bonds all her life. She knew that they were rare, that they required a special connection between dragon and master. She knew that most people never formed a true bond, even with perfect dragons from the best bloodlines. She also knew that imperfect dragons could not bond at all. Everyone said so. The experts, the scholars, the breeders. They all agreed. Broken dragons had broken souls. They could not connect with anyone. But something was connecting now. Yuna could feel it. It was like a thread stretching between her heart and theirs. It was thin and fragile, but it was there. When Tay was hungry, she knew before he made a sound. When Hannah was happy, she felt a spark of joy in her chest. When Wu was scared, her own hand started to shake. It was impossible. Everyone said it was impossible. But Yuna had stopped caring what everyone said. The weeks turned into a month. The thread grew stronger. Yuna was on a job when she felt it for the first time. She was in the cargo hold of her ship, moving heavy boxes from one side to the other. The hatchlings were in the living area, playing some game of their own. Suddenly, she felt fear. Deep, cold fear that was not her own. She dropped the box she was carrying and ran to the living area. The hatchlings were fine. They were sitting together on the couch, their bodies pressed close, their eyes wide. "What happened?" Yuna asked. "What scared you?" Tay lifted his head. He made a series of clicking sounds, and somehow Yuna understood. There had been a loud noise outside the ship, a banging sound that reminded them of the auction hall, of the handlers of the cages. "It's okay," Yuna said, kneeling down beside them. "It was just someone loading cargo on another ship. It's nothing dangerous." The fear faded. Warmth replaced it. Trust. Yuna sat back on her heels, her heart pounding. She had felt their fear. Not just seen it in their eyes, not just guessed it from their behavior. She had felt it in her own chest, as real as her own heartbeat. The bond was real. She started to cry. She did not mean to, but the tears came anyway. She had bought 3 broken hatchlings because no one else wanted them. She had fed them and cared for them because it was the right thing to do. She had never expected anything in return, but they had given her everything. The hatchlings moved closer. Tay licked the tears from her face with his rough tongue. Hannah made soft cooing sounds in her ear. Wu pressed his warm body against her side and stopped trembling. They were telling her something. She could feel it through the bond, clear as words. We love you. We choose you. You are ours. Yuna gathered them in her arms and held them tight. I love you too, she whispered. I choose you too. You are mine. The bond solidified. What had been a thread became a rope. What had been a rope became a chain. What had been a chain became something stronger, something that could never be broken. They were bonded now, truly bonded. Human and dragons, connected at the deepest level. It should have been impossible. The experts said so. The scholars said so. Everyone in the galaxy said so. But the galaxy had never met Yuna. The galaxy had never met anyone who looked at broken things and saw beauty. The galaxy had never met anyone who heard the word impossible and thought, let me try anyway. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humans. Over the next few days, the bond continued to grow. Yuna could now feel the hatchlings even when she was far from the ship. She knew if they were hungry, if they were scared, if they were happy. She could send her own feelings back to them, warm waves of love and comfort that made them purr with joy. The hatchlings were changing faster now. Tay's blindness no longer seemed like a weakness. Through the bond, he could see what Yuna saw. When she looked at the stars, he lifted his head as if he could see them too. Hannah's missing wings no longer held her back. She had learned to run so fast that she seemed to fly anyway. And through the bond, she could feel the memory of flight in Yuna's dreams, the feeling of being free and weightless. Wu's scars no longer made him afraid. The bond had filled him with Yuna's courage, her warmth, her steady heart. He still could not breathe fire, but he no longer trembled. He walked with his head high, like a dragon who knew he was loved. They were still imperfect. They would always be imperfect. But they were also bonded. They were also loved. They were also family. And that made all the difference. Yuna sat in her pilot's chair, looking out at the stars. The hatchlings were sleeping behind her, their bodies curled together in their nest of blankets. Through the bond, she could feel their dreams soft and warm and full of light. She smiled. The galaxy had told her that imperfect dragons could not bond. The galaxy had told her that she was wasting her time, her money, her heart. The galaxy had been wrong. The morning star was flying through the dark space between stars when the raiders came. Yuna was in the cargo hold, checking the straps on a shipment of medical supplies. It was a simple job. Fly from Station 12 to a small colony on the outer rim. Deliver the medicine. Get paid. Go home. She never saw the attack coming. The first warning was a feeling, a spike of fear that came through the bond, sharp and sudden. Yuna dropped the strap she was holding and ran toward the front of the ship. Tay, Hannah, and Wu were already at the window. They were bigger now, after 2 months of good food and love. Tay was the size of a large wolf. Hannah was smaller but faster. Wu was the biggest of all, his scar body thick with muscle. They were all staring at something outside. What is it? Yuna asked. Then she saw the ships. There were 3 of them, coming out of the darkness like sharks. They were painted black, with no markings, no lights. Raider ships. Pirates. The kind of people who attacked cargo ships in the empty spaces where no one could hear you scream. Yuna's blood went cold. She ran to the pilot's chair and tried to turn the ship, but the raiders were faster. 2 of them moved to block her escape, while the third came straight at her from behind. They were surrounding her, trapping her like hunters trapping prey. Her communication screen crackled. A voice came through, rough and cruel. Human ship. Shut down your engines. Prepare to be boarded. If you cooperate, we might let you live. Yuna's hands were shaking on the controls. She was not a fighter. She had no weapons. Her ship was old and slow. There was nothing she could do. The hatchlings pressed against her legs. Through the bond, she could feel their fear, but she could also feel something else. Something fierce. Something protective. They wanted to fight. No, Una said, looking down at them. You can't. You're too small. They have guns. They'll kill you. But the hatchlings did not back down. Tay growled, a deep sound that she had never heard him make before. Hannah's claws scraped against the floor, ready to spring. Wu stood in front of Una like a shield, his scarred body between her and the door. The raider ship docked with hers. Una heard the clang of metal against metal, the hiss of the airlock opening. Heavy footsteps in the corridor. She looked around for something. Anything she could use as a weapon. There was nothing. Just her and 3 dragons who were still too young, too small, too broken to fight. The door to the cockpit slid open. The raiders were huge. They were covered in armor, their faces hidden behind helmets. They carried weapons that Una did not recognize, but she knew what they could do. One shot from those guns would kill anything. The leader stepped forward. He was the biggest of them all. His voice was the same one that had come through the communication screen. Well, he said, looking at Una, a human cargo pilot, all alone out here. Please, Una said. Her voice was shaking. Take the cargo. Take whatever you want. Just don't hurt us. The raider laughed. Us? There's only one of you, little human. Then he saw the dragons. The laughter stopped. The raiders went still. For a long moment, no one moved. Dragons, one of the raiders whispered. She has dragons. The leader took a step back. Even through his helmet, Una could see his fear. Dragons were dangerous. Everyone knew that. Even imperfect dragons were still dragons. Bonded or unbonded? The leader asked. His voice was harder now, careful. Una did not know what to say. She felt the bond humming between her and the hatchlings, strong and warm. They were definitely bonded. But would that save her or doom her? Unbonded, she lied. They're just pets. They won't hurt you. The leader relaxed. He stepped forward again, raising his weapon. Then, they won't stop us from taking everything you have, including them. 3 dragons, even imperfect ones, will sell for a good price. He reached for Wu, and Wu struck. The scarred dragon moved faster than Una had ever seen him move. His jaws closed on the raider's arm, biting through the armor like it was paper. The raider screamed. He tried to pull away, but Wu held on, growling, shaking his head like a wild animal. The other raiders raised their weapons. But before they could fire, Hannah launched herself from the wall. She could not fly, but she could jump. She landed on the nearest raider's helmet and started clawing at his visor. Her claws were not as sharp as they should have been, but they were sharp enough. The raider stumbled backward, trying to get her off, firing his weapon wildly at nothing. Tay moved through the chaos like a ghost. He could not see, but he did not need to. He could hear everything. He knew where each raider was standing, where each weapon was pointing. He struck at legs, at arms, at any exposed piece of flesh he could find. The raiders were screaming now. They had not expected this. They had thought the dragons were just pets, just broken things that would cower in the corner. They were wrong. Una stood frozen, watching her dragons fight. Through the bond, she could feel their rage, their desperation, their love. They were not fighting for themselves. They were fighting for her. They would die for her if they had to. The leader finally threw Wu off his arm. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at the dragon's chest. His hand was bleeding, his arm hanging at a strange angle, but he could still fire. Enough, he roared. I will kill this beast, and then I will kill you, human. I will... Wu opened his mouth. Something happened. There was no fire. There had never been fire. Wu's throat had been damaged at birth. The experts said he could never produce flame. But something came out of his mouth. Something bright. Something that was not quite fire, but was close enough. It was lightning. A bolt of pure energy shot from Wu's jaws and struck the leader in the chest. The raider flew backward, his armor smoking, his body limp. He hit the wall and did not move. The other raiders stopped fighting. They stared at their fallen leader. They stared at Wu, who was standing over his body, electricity crackling between his teeth. "Run," Yuna said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence, it sounded like thunder. "Run now, or my dragons will kill you all." The raiders ran. They left their leader on the floor. They scrambled over each other, trying to get back to their ship. Within minutes, their 3 ships were pulling away, disappearing into the darkness of space. Yuna sank to the floor. Her whole body was shaking. She could not believe what had just happened. The hatchlings came to her immediately. They pressed against her, making soft sounds of concern. Through the bond, they sent her waves of love, of protection, of fierce pride. "We saved you. We protected you. You are ours." Yuna wrapped her arms around them and held on tight. "You beautiful, stupid, brave creatures," she whispered. "You could have died. They could have killed you. But they had not died. They had fought. They had won." She looked at Wu, at the electricity still sparking faintly around his jaws. He could not breathe fire. The experts had said that made him broken, useless, defective. But he could breathe lightning. No one had ever seen a dragon do that before. She looked at Hannah, who was cleaning blood off her claws with her tongue. She had no wings. She could never fly. But she could fight like a demon, fast and fierce and fearless. She looked at Tay, whose blind eyes stared at nothing but, who had moved to the battle like he could see everything. His ears were better than any eyes. His bond with Yuna was so strong that he could use her senses when he needed to. They were not broken. They had never been broken. They were just different. And their differences made them strong in ways that no one had ever imagined. Yuna started to laugh. It was a strange laugh, half crying, half joy. She could not stop. She laughed until her sides hurt, until the hatchlings were making worried sounds and pressing closer. "I'm okay," she told them, wiping her eyes. "I'm better than okay. I am alive. Because of you." She stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to hold her weight. She walked to the pilot's chair and sat down. The raiders were gone. The stars were quiet again. The cargo was safe. She looked out at the darkness of space and smiled. The galaxy had said her dragons were worthless. The galaxy had said they could never fight, never protect, never bond. The galaxy had been so wrong. The story spread like fire across the galaxy. It started small. The raiders who had attacked the Morning Star told their friends what happened. Those friends told other friends. Soon, every pirate, every smuggler, every criminal in the Outer Rim knew the tale. A human woman with 3 broken dragons. A fight that should have been easy. A defeat that should have been impossible. But the story did not stay in the shadows. It climbed into the light. Traders heard it at space stations. Soldiers heard it in military outposts. Nobles heard it in their golden halls. Everyone everywhere was talking about the human and her imperfect dragons. Yuna did not know any of this. She was just living her life, flying her ship, caring for her dragons. She did not know that she was becoming famous. She did not know that her name was being spoken in places she had never heard of. She found out 3 months after the attack. The Morning Star had stopped at Station 7 for repairs. Yuna was walking through the market, looking for fresh meat for Tay, Hannah, and Wu. The dragons were back on the ship, too big now to bring into crowded places. They did not like being left behind, but Yuna could feel their patience through the bond. They trusted her. They knew she would come back. She was looking at a display of dried fish when she heard someone say her name. "That's her. That's the human." Yuna turned around. A group of beings was standing a few feet away, staring at her. They were from different species, different worlds, but they were all looking at her the same way, like she was something special. "Can I help you?" Yuna asked. One of them stepped forward. He was tall with green scales and 3 eyes. His voice trembled when he spoke. "You're Yuna?" The one with the imperfect dragons. Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. "How do you know about that?" "Everyone knows, The being said, "Everyone in the galaxy knows. The raiders who attacked you, they told everyone what happened. They said your dragons fought like demons. They said one of them breathed lightning. They said you should have died, but you did not." Una did not know what to say. She had never wanted to be famous. She had just wanted to live quietly with her dragons. "It's true," she said finally. "My dragons saved my life." The beings started talking all at once. They asked questions faster than Una could answer. How had she bonded with imperfect dragons? How had she made them so strong? How had she done the impossible? Una raised her hands. "Please, I don't have any special powers. I didn't do anything magical. I just love them. That's all." The beings went quiet. They looked at each other, confusion on their faces. "You just loved them?" one of them asked. "Yes, but they were broken. They were defective. They were marked for disposal. They were scared," Una said. Her voice was gentle but firm. "They were alone. They needed someone to care for them. I was that someone. That's all there is to it." The beings stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, they started to back away. But their eyes stayed on her, filled with something that looked like wonder. Una bought her fish and went back to her ship. But the story kept spreading. Scholars started writing about her. They called it the Una event. They studied everything they knew about dragon bonds and found that none of it explained what had happened. By every rule, every law, every theory, Una should not have been able to bond with imperfect dragons. And yet she had. Some scholars thought there was something special about humans. Their soft bodies, their short lives, their strange habit of caring about things that did not help them survive. Maybe, some of them said, those things were not weaknesses at all. Maybe they were strengths that the galaxy had never understood. Other scholars disagreed. They said Una was just one person, one example. You could not draw conclusions about an entire species from a single story. But then another story came. A human on a mining colony had taken in a sick animal that everyone else had abandoned. The animal had been dying, its body failing. But the human had sat with it for weeks, feeding it, talking to it, keeping it warm. And slowly, against all odds, the animal had recovered. Then another story. A human soldier had refused to leave a wounded enemy on the battlefield. He had carried the enemy to safety, even though it slowed him down, even though it put his own life at risk. When asked why, he had said, because he needed help. Then another, and another, and another. Stories of humans doing impossible things, not because they were strong, not because they were smart, but because they cared. The galaxy started to pay attention. Una knew none of this. She was still just a cargo pilot with 3 dragons. She flew her routes. She did her work. She came home every night to Tay, Hannah, and Wu. They were fully grown now. Tay was as big as a horse, his silver scales gleaming, his blind eyes turned toward the stars. Hannah was smaller, but faster than any dragon anyone had ever seen, her wingless body built for speed. Wu was the biggest of all, his scarred scales crackling with electricity, his eyes full of quiet strength. They were still imperfect. They would always be imperfect. But they were also legends. One day, Una received a message. It was from Station 12, from the auction house where she had first bought her dragons. The message was short. "We wish to speak with you. We have a proposition." Una thought about ignoring it. She did not have good memories of that place. But something made her curious. She flew to Station 12 and walked into the auction house. The auctioneer was waiting for her. He was the same one who had sold her Tay, Hannah, and Wu. The same one who had laughed at her. He was not laughing now. "You changed everything," he said. His 4 arms hung at his sides, defeated. "Since your story spread, no one wants to buy perfect dragons anymore. They all want imperfect ones. They think they can do what you did. They think they can bond with the broken ones." Una felt her heart skip. What happened to the imperfect hatchlings? "That's why we called you here." The auctioneer led her to a room in the back of the auction house. "We don't know what to do with them anymore." The room was full of cages. Inside each cage was a dragon hatchling. Blind ones, wingless ones, scarred ones, hatchlings that walked wrong or could not make sound, or had scales that never grew in right. There were dozens of them. "We can't sell them to just anyone," the auctioneer said. "Most people don't have what you have. They can't do what you did. The hatchlings would just suffer. But we can't keep them either. We don't have the space, the food, the patience." Una walked slowly through the room. The hatchlings watched her pass. Some of them pressed against the bars of their cages. Some of them made soft sounds of hope. "What do you want from me?" Una asked. "Take them," the auctioneer said. "Take as many as you can. Find them homes. Find them humans who will care for them. You know what they need." "We don't." Una stopped in front of a cage. Inside was a tiny hatchling with only 3 legs. It was smaller than all the others, its scales a dull brown, but its eyes were bright and full of life. She opened the cage and reached inside. The hatchling sniffed her hand. Then it pressed its head against her palm and made a sound of pure joy. Through her bond with Tay, Hannah, and Wu, she felt their response. They could sense what was happening. They were sending her approval, encouragement, love. "Bring them home," they seemed to say. "We will teach them. We will show them how to be strong." Una smiled. "I'll take them all," she said. The auctioneer stared at her. "All of them? But you don't have room. You don't have money. You can't." "I'll find a way," Una said. "I always do." She spent the next year building a home on a quiet moon. She used every coin she had ever earned. She called in every favor she had ever been owed. And slowly, with the help of her 3 dragons and the growing number of imperfect hatchlings, she built something new, a sanctuary, a place where broken dragons could come to be healed, a place where they could find humans who would love them not despite their flaws, but because of them. Other humans came to help. They had heard the stories. They wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. They wanted to prove that the galaxy was wrong about them. Word spread even further. Now, when beings across the galaxy talked about humans, they did not just talk about their soft bodies or their short lives. They talked about their capacity for love, their willingness to care for things that no one else wanted, their strange, impossible ability to see beauty in broken things. Una sat on the porch of her home and watched the sunset. Tay lay beside her, his silver head resting on her lap. Hannah was on the roof, watching for trouble. Wu was in the field below, teaching a group of young hatchlings how to hunt. She thought about the day she had first seen them, huddled in that cage at the auction. She thought about all the people who had laughed at her, who had told her she was wasting her time, who had said that imperfect dragons could never be worth anything. She thought about how wrong they had all been. "You know," she said to Tay, scratching behind his ears, "I used to think I was saving you, but really you saved me." Tay made a soft sound of contentment. Through the bond, he sent her a feeling that needed no words. They had saved each other, and together they had changed the galaxy. The beings who had once laughed at imperfect dragons now sought them out. The scholars who had said bonds were impossible now wrote new theories. The nobles who had only wanted perfect creatures now understood that perfection was never the point. The point was love. It had always been love. And humans, it turned out, had more love to give than anyone had ever imagined. Una looked up at the stars and smiled. The legend of the imperfect dragons was only beginning. But that was a story for another day.